Hello and welcome back to the Wildlands. Today I'm going to be giving you a tour of the entire food forest. Very excited, this is something I've been wanting to do for a really long time, and today is finally the day. I've taken inspiration from other people whose food forest tours I've seen, and they've been good and interesting, and I love plants. So if you love plants, you want to know what all the different plants are. What's that little leafy thing, and why have you got those flowers over there, and so on. And so often the tours, they'll mention, oh, this is my almond tree, but they won't say about all the different plants that are underneath it. Well, that's what I'm going to do for you today. I'm going to talk you through every single plant that we have in our entire food forest and why we've planted it. Sometimes the answer is as simple as because it's pretty, other times it's for food or for all the other reasons, and I'm going to talk you through them as we go. Before we start walking around, I'll give you a little bit of context about our food forest. We've lived on our land for 3 years nearly, and the food forest in its current incarnation was just started last year in January. The previous year we tried putting garden beds in and it didn't work. So last year January we raised the whole lot. We had friends around to help us dig swales. We have 4 swales with corresponding berms to capture water, and then we've done all the planting. So everything you see here, when we do the whole tour, everything has just been growing since last January, which when you see the size of some of the plants, like this magnificent enormous thyme in front of me, seems almost impossible, but I promise you it's true. The idea of the food forest, when I hear the word forest, I think of lots and lots of trees, tall trees, maybe like a pine forest or a deciduous beech forest or something like that, and this doesn't look very foresty. We're in the middle of some pine forest and woodland, which is very nice, but what we're actually creating here, it's probably more of a garden, but food forest is the permaculture term for what we're doing. So we are interspersing trees with perennial vegetables, with annual vegetables, with herbs and flowers, and so on. Our food forest is on our land in central Portugal. In the winter we can go down to about -6, but it's usually only for a few hours, so we don't get really hard frosts like we used to in England when we lived there. It tends to be just a little, the coldest temperature would only be for around an hour or so. In the summer, we are in the middle of July at the moment, blazing sunshine. It's going to be 33 degrees tops today, but we can go up to, and have gone up to, 47, 48 last year during the peak heat waves, which stretched on for several weeks at a time. This year we've had a lot more rain than previous years, and we're also having a much milder summer. So when I say mild, it's not really topped out beyond 35 degrees apart from the odd day here and there. So that's what our climate is like. We get some nice breezes here, but nothing too strong. Lots of sunshine, the sun rises over there and sets over there. When we were looking for land, we wanted south facing, because that's what we've always thought was best for you. We wanted so that you can get the most sunshine in your land, but if you're in central Portugal, it's really hot, you don't want to be south facing. We're actually kind of northeast facing down that way. Right, well I think that's enough background. Let's get on with the tour. In front of me is the first swale. It does a little curve and it's got a short path in the middle of it, which also acts as an overflow. Planted on the first berm is an absolutely enormous thyme plant. It's fabulous, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Of course, it's only a year old. I planted it from seed last spring and it's really, really happy. Lots of strawberries. This here is a perennial kale, and every year it puts out little shoots on the sides, and then we pull those off, stick them in soil, let them root, and then we've got more perennial kales. Sunflowers, just because they make us happy. We do try and save some of the seeds for our chickens, but the goldfinches tend to get there before us, which we don't mind at all because they're lovely little birds. The big monster plant here, this is a comfrey. Comfrey is fantastic to have in your garden or in your food forest. It has so many uses. First of all, it's a dynamic accumulator. That means it's got super deep taproot and it pulls up all sorts of nutrients from in the soil, and it makes them then available in its leaves. So when the plant dies, when the leaves naturally die off at the bottom, or if you pull them off like that, shred them and drop them on the soil as a mulch, when these rot down, it returns all of those nutrients that it pulled from deep in the soil, so it makes them available for all your other plants. You can also put these leaves shredded up into a bucket of water, leave it for a couple of weeks, it gets a bit stinky, and then you use that water as a natural fertilizer. And we usually mix 1 part in 10, 1 part of comfrey juice to 10 parts of water in a watering can, and we just use it on the tomatoes, anything else you think could use a little fertility boost. The final thing you can do with it is you can chop it and drop it like this, and you can feed it to your chickens. Behind me we have a little orange tree. He's set in a circle. Around here we've got some chives at the base, some lobelia and snapdragons just because they look pretty. And at the base we've got some globe amaranth. It's my first time growing it. I thought it was going to get bigger. It's just a little plant, but the little fluffy red flower heads you can save for tea. Along this side then there's a wall. Above it is what we call raspberry row, a whole load of raspberry plants trained along wires, and some more sunflowers and interesting things. This wall seems to be particularly good for growing brassicas. It gets morning sunshine, as you can see at the moment, but then the shade of the massive holm oak tree is going to move over it, and once that's moved away we'll get the shade of this holm oak tree, so it's in the shade for most of the day. The brassicas don't then get too hot. At the moment we have some sweet potatoes growing, some perennial kale, some hungry gap kale and some cavolo nero, and they're all looking quite happy. On the other side of Swale 1 we have a tiny little nook, and we've filled it with these fabulous daisies. There's a rose-scented geranium, a lemon verbena, and the pièce de résistance is my absolute favourite tree in the whole garden. This is a red lime tree. The limes that grow are green on the outside. When you cut them open they have red flesh. So far we haven't had any fruit from it, despite the tree being with us for 3 years. But this year looks like its year. It has 2 that I can see on it. It had a few more, but it's dropped those, and I'm hoping... Flapjack. I'm hoping that that means that it's going to put all of its energy into these. That's a really exciting thing. I really love my citrus. At the base of it, we have a plant called mini mint, also known as Corsican mint. And it doesn't grow much higher than this, about 1 inch, and it likes to spread and it likes to droodle. It's very good to have in pots droodling over the edge. It has a really, really strong minty scent, and I just love it for ground cover. The only slight drawback with it, growing it here in central Portugal, is that it does like it damp and it likes the shade quite a lot. So we've got it here, it gets shade almost all day long, and we just make sure that it gets a sprinkle every time the sprinkler system is on. On the other side of Swale 1 we have this magnificent tree. This is an almond and it's just doing so well. The first swale in the food forest gets the most water. Anytime we accidentally overflow the IBCs when we're filling them up, the water pours in here. All of the time it rains. When it rains on the whole nursery area that's up there with our cold frame and our polytunnel, all of that water eventually channels down this path into this swale, so it's getting so much water. Its first 2 years with us, it gave us 2 almonds in the first year and 3 almonds in the second year, and this year it's got about, I'd estimate about 50 almonds on it, but it's just putting out so much growth. I did actually prune it this spring, and I chopped off all the tops to manage its height, and I gave it lots and lots of space inside, so all of these stems that you can see, they're as thick as my thumb. They've all grown just this year. He's getting a bit big for his boots. It provides so much shade behind him going across my spiral and the other plants that are here on the berm, and that's what we want. He's giving us a food crop, he's mulching the ground when he drops his leaves, and it's providing shade for the other plants, and the tayberry is starting to climb up him as well, so that's stacking the functions in our food forest. Behind me you see the frame of a polytunnel that we've covered with rebar so that we can grow things up and over it. Now the biggest plant behind me here, this is a thornless blackberry. It's actually Rosie's. When we first planted it, it nearly died. That's a common theme in our garden before we really understood the climate and what we were doing. But we've moved it, we've added it some extra water for it, and it's absolutely thriving this year. It's gone great guns. It's spreading left and right and up and over the top. When the stems hit the ground, then they'll put out roots, and then you can snip off the stem, dig it up, and you've got a whole new plant, which is excellent. Propagation, we love it. It's covered in green blackberries at the moment. There's one ripe one all the way up there at the top, which we haven't been able to go and get yet. We're very excited to have a nice crop of big, fat, juicy blackberries. And without the thorns, you don't have to worry that you're going to get caught on things, and it's not too much of an evil plant to be working with. Down at the other end, we have a kiwi. I don't actually know what kind of kiwi it is anymore because we bought it 3 years ago and we've lost the labels, so we have absolutely no idea. If you want to grow kiwis, they do grow very well here in Portugal. You have to have one male, and he can have at least up to 6 or 7 female plants. We're hoping that we have one male. We also have a little kiwi here, and there's another one that's behind me. So we have 3, and again, as I say, we've lost the labels, so I don't know if we have 1 male and 2 females, or possibly 3 females. We haven't had fruit, but that's because this year is the first year that's really gotten going. So it's entirely possible that next year we'll get flowers and kiwis. The purpose of having them growing up and over is to create shade on the inside of the hoop house, which is where I've got my tomatoes growing. We have cosmos behind me, one of my favourite flowers. They attract pollinators, they're just beautiful. On this side, this is a hardy hibiscus, Hibiscus syriacus. It comes from Syria, so you know it's used to cold temperatures and it can also deal with droughts. He's looking a little bit sickly at the moment, and that's because I left him in his pot for a little bit too long, but he's gone in the ground now, and I think he's actually even got a little bud here, so that's very exciting, and hopefully he's going to get really, really big and bush out and put some shade on the back of the hoop house here. Behind him here we have a clary sage. Then what else do we have? A grapevine here and another grapevine here also to grow up and over the hoop house. Then some hollyhocks, just because I love them, and you can eat the flowers as well. They're going to get nice and big and tall here, and they'll probably screen off the whole of the hoop house. And now I'll take you inside the hoop house where I grow my tomatoes. These are in the sun all day long, and as you come back here, we're in the deep dark shade. The plants are all the way up here. In fact, I've pinched the tops off of these ones. Look, they're trying to burst through the roof of the hoop house here. We have got lots and lots of tomatoes though. On their way, they were just slower to put the fruit out. Going down this side, you've got the fabulous pink cosmos. I've actually got some little cucumbers on the inside of the hoop house ready to grow up, but they've been so slow to start this year. I'm not sure what's wrong with them. And if you go right to the very, very back, behind the tomatoes back here, there's some Cavolo Nero, dinosaur kale, and some hungry gap kale. There's some marigolds and basil interplanted. They're very good companion plants. Obviously you can eat them as herbs. There's some dill back here and a little block of holy basil tulsi, which was an experiment because I have it elsewhere in the sun and it's not doing so great, but back here in the shade it's loving it. It's leafing up, it's getting very big. Standing in the middle of my herb garden. It's gotten a bit big and a bit unruly when I planted everything. I thought I was going to have neat little herbs, and they've just taken over and done their own thing, which is fine with me. So here, absolutely covered in bees and butterflies of all different types. We have oregano, which has all gone to flower. This is mugwort. In its second year, last year it didn't do so well, but this year it must have really got its roots in. And mugwort is wonderful. You can use it for flavouring soups and stews. You can also use it, apparently, to encourage lucid dreaming and very vivid dreams. You can either pick the leaves and use them to make teas, or you can put them in a little pouch under your pillow. The big bush here, this is a colecarpa, not a herb. It's one of the first plants I bought for our food forest. And I bought it because at the time in the autumn it was covered in teeny tiny little purple berries. The purple berries are edible, you can use them to make jams and jellies, but they're so small I don't think it's worth the bother. So I leave them on here for the insects and the birds to eat. But it really is, it's a beautiful plant as is, and it's even more beautiful when it's covered in berries. Here with the purple flowers, and on my right we have hyssop. I grew those from seed. In fact, I grew everything here apart from the colecarpa from seed, so it's all doing really well. It makes me very proud when I've grown something from seed and it gets huge. Again, the bees and the butterflies absolutely love hyssop, and we use it I dry it for tea, or we use it fresh, steeped in hot water. If you have a cold or a cough, it's particularly good for respiratory ailments. Lemon balm, same thing, we use it in teas. It's very good for calming anxiety, and it just tastes really lemony and fresh and zingy. Around behind me we have some more mugwort, we have some mint. And at the very back we have yarrow. Now the yarrow I thought was going to grow very tall, but it wasn't, as it turns out, as tall as the mugwort. So I'm in the process of digging the yarrow up and putting it further down in the food forest so that we can see its beautiful pink flowers. The spiral bed is one of my favourite little creations. It's just a bit of fun, and growing along it we have obviously hundreds of sunflowers, very beautiful. And then this year in the spiral I've chosen to put chili peppers. Most of them are cayenne, and we're going to pick them when they're ripe and dry them and then powder them so that we have our own cayenne powder to see us through the winter. Some of them are called Vesuvio, and they haven't put any chilies out yet. They've been busy getting all their flowers ready, and then they're going to have their chili peppers popped up all over the top like this, like little pretty hedgehogs. Never tried growing them before, but they seem quite happy in the spiral too. Strawberries. Covering the berm on the left there. Lots and lots of strawberries, sunflowers. Around the spiral, there's the thyme, dill, a kumquat, it's hanging in there. Tansy, big sage plant, grew this from seed 1 year ago. It's gotten huge. Lavender, chilies. Another tayberry, whose stick is not holding it upright. It just wants to sprawl. Let's get rid of the stick. It's obviously really, really happy, the tayberry, but we don't want it to cover the path, so I need to give it something to climb up. I'm hoping it'll climb up this fabulous almond, but it's not quite long enough for that yet. This is a feijoa going round the top of the spiral here. Pineapple guava. Very exciting. Not had fruit off it yet, but again, it's been getting its roots going all last year, and this year it's finally put on some growth, so maybe next year. Some violas, pass the time. Orange Cosmo. This has just gone in a couple of months ago. This is a pomegranate tree, and I've never grown pomegranates before. They have the most gorgeous little flowers. Look at that. The first time I saw the bud, I thought it was a pomegranate because it looks very pomegranate-y, and then it popped open and did this. And then it looks like this, very strange. Fingers crossed for pomegranates. And then we keep going around the spiral past all the chilies to the Vesuvios in the centre. Oh, and there's some chives down there as well. Chives are good for pollinators when they put their flowers out. You can eat the flowers, you can eat chives. Lovely. At the back here we have some oregano and some parsley. More sunflowers, almond. What else do we have here? There's some Thai basil. There's a stray cabbage. I'm not sure why he's still there. He obviously didn't put out in the winter, so he's still growing happily in July. A couple of onions, some chickpeas, a perennial kale, and then we're back to the others. Walking down from the hoop house and the herb garden into Swale 2. We use the swales as paths. Every spring I dig them out a little bit deeper, then we refill them with straw and put wood chip on the top to create a nice mulch to keep the moisture in. Should it rain, the water collects in here and soaks into the ground, creating a plume underground. We also sometimes top that up from our well, which we use to fill IBC water containers, and then we let that water just flood out as an added bonus for the soil. Haven't needed to do that this year. So that's our swales as paths. This is Swale 2. First plant we have is a plum tree, which has not given us any plums, but it looks like it's suffered this year from eating by flea beetles. All of his leaves are a little bit holey. Then you'll notice more strawberries. We use a lot of strawberries in the garden because they have a lot of good qualities to them. The first and main reason we plant them on all of our berms, which is the lump next to the swale, is that they get their roots deep, they get their roots wide, and they hold all the soil together. So that's wonderful. They're very leafy. They put out wide leaves and they put them out like this to catch the sun, but that then shades the soil, which stops a lot of water from leaving from evaporation, and it keeps the temperature of the soil just that little bit cooler. Then they put out lots and lots of flowers, which I've noticed the bees seem to love, and these little blue butterflies that are all around me at the moment. And then of course you get the strawberries. A punnet of strawberries these days cost somewhere between €4 and €6, and usually by the time you get them home, half of them have already started to go mouldy or mushy. They don't have very good flavour. We absolutely adore strawberries, my family and I. We eat a lot of them. We don't want to be buying them from the supermarket, so we've grown probably thousands of plants now, and they started giving us strawberries in April, fully ripe, fabulous, tasty. We had so many, we were giving them away to friends and family, storing them in the freezer. We were having pure strawberry smoothies for breakfast and lunch, and then fresh strawberries for dessert, and there was still more than enough to share with the blackbirds and the jays and the magpies that like to visit our food forest. That's the story of the strawberries. What else do we have here? These gorgeous little flowers, these are straw flowers, and they have no reason other than beauty and for the pollinators. Then coming along here, we have tansy, which has various uses, but I only keep it as a companion to my cherry trees. We have a little cherry tree back here. This was planted this spring, so we haven't had cherries from it yet. Lots of sunflowers everywhere. We do like our sunflowers, as I mentioned earlier. On this side then, more strawberries, more lemon balm, some parsley used for cooking. Big fat lemon balm. Lemon balm, if you're not that keen on lemon balm, but you'd like to have some in your garden, I'd very much advise you to put it in a pot and to chop off its flowers, because it's incredibly good at self-seeding. It has you find little plants all over your garden, nowhere near the original plant. And also it has really like cast iron roots. It doesn't want to be yanked out. If I decided I didn't want him in my garden, I'd have a hard time getting rid of him. Luckily, we love lemon balm. We use it an awful lot, cutting it and drying it or picking it fresh for teas. So I don't mind if he wants to pop up all over my garden. If you notice when they're small and they're growing somewhere that you don't want, you can just yank them out. If you let them get big, it's game over. So a little bit further round then, I've got some sweet alyssum as a companion plant, and its teeny little flowers are supposed to be edible. I've tried them. I don't think they're very exciting really, so we just use them, leave them for the bees and the butterflies. Here, some more yarrow that's popped up all by itself. More sunflowers, more strawberries, sunflowers, strawberries. And all the way down here, there's a little white currant. As we continue through Swale 2, which goes in a big curve, so it's going off around there, this little gap here that I'm crouching in is an overflow. So should that swale ever get so very full that it wants to burst its banks, instead of bothering the berms, it's going to overflow down here and it'll go off further down the food forest to the next swale. On this side then, we have more strawberries. We have this, which is Love in a Mist, which is also used as black cumin seed or black seed oil. That's where it comes from. It has the most fabulous little alien-like blue flowers. This one's very small. I think maybe I didn't get him out of his module tray fast enough, which I do quite often. Oh look, there's a white Love in a Mist there. Beautiful. Back here we have a nasturtium, very pretty. We use them to eat. We put the leaves and the flowers in salads, very nice. This here with a butterfly on it, this is Brompton stock, which I'm growing for the flowers, which are edible and very pretty. And on this side we have some China pinks for the same reason. This, I believe, is going to be an orange Cosmo, taking its time to put the flowers out, but they're gorgeous too. The rest of the swale is almost being overtaken by the strawberries. Because of course the plants spread by chucking out runners and then growing new plants, we've let them do that wherever they liked. It's free strawberry plants, but every so often, maybe a couple of times a year, we need to go along and just dig out the plants that have decided to come and start growing in the middle of the path, and we haven't quite done that recently. This gorgeous little bamboo is just for decorative purposes, for a little bit of shade and for this wonderful noise that you get when it's breezy. Here we have mint. I know we're going to have people telling us that we shouldn't have mint growing in the ground and that we're mad and it'll take over and that it's very invasive. We actually find it to be quite a useful weed suppressant, because if mint is growing, then the weeds can't grow because there isn't any soil available for them. And mint, of course, you can use it. We chop it, we freeze it, we dry it for tea, we put it in salads and so on. And honestly, if it gets to be a bother and it grows up in your path like this, you walk on it, and that tends to put it off growing too much. And if you really don't want it, you just give it a yank like that. There we are. Oh, and the mint's not growing there anymore. So really, we're quite happy with it rambling around the garden as it likes, and we'll just yank it up if it gets to be too much of a bother. Behind the mint here, there's a huge thyme plant. I grew it from seed, so it was teeny tiny once, and now it's enormous. It's spreading out. It doesn't mind the drought. It loves the sun. It flowers, has beautiful little flowers on there, which the bees absolutely adore. And then once it's done flowering, it sets seed, and then you get little thyme plants everywhere. There's one just there I can see, and a few around here as well. And the same as the mint. I can dig it up, stick it in a pot and keep it elsewhere. I can replant it elsewhere in the garden, or I can just chop the lot at the roots and dry it and use it in my cooking. We've got so many herbs that we never really need to buy herbs at all anymore, not in year 2. And that smells fabulous. As you come out of the end of the swale, go around the corner to go into the Swale 3, you have this beautiful little lemon tree. It's only been in the ground for a year, and it's doing really, really well. It's covered in flowers which smell absolutely divine, and even a little baby lemon there, here and there. Very exciting. We've come out of the end of Swale 2, come around the corner of the bamboo, and we find ourselves here just about to go down Swale 3. The ubiquitous strawberries, quite happy. We've got our sprayers on at the moment. You might be able to see the little droplets coming in here and there. We water the berms twice a week, and each berm has its own IBC, which holds 1,000 litres of water, which has come out of our well, and we release that entire 1,000 litres onto the berms. So they get 2,000 litres of water a week, which is why they're all looking so green and leafy. Here is a gooseberry. The gooseberry is not doing so well. He has a few berries on him, but I don't think he likes where he's planted. I think he's getting too much direct sunlight, and I might actually just pick him up and put him on the other side of this magnificent apple tree. This is a Fuji apple tree growing next to a Granny Smith. Now these trees were planted at the same time, but the Granny Smith, I noticed that at the bottom where it's grafted onto rootstock, the graft part has grown huge, and the little stem that was grafted onto the rootstock has not done so well. But he's hanging in there, so I'm hopeful that one day he'll bear apples. And the Fuji gave us 2 apples last year, and again this year there's one just here, and there's another one over there, and he's growing and spreading and really happy. I'm a little bit fearful of pruning at the moment. I did a little bit more pruning this year than I did last year. He probably could do with a really good prune, but at the moment I just do little bits. I'm worried about killing off my whole tree. But the other object of having these trees in is the shade that they give. So he's shading most of the bed behind him, which means I'm completely happy. Here, just almost blocking your view here, this is the branch of a little plum tree, which is in Rosie's garden, which I will show you a bit later. It's in the shade at the moment, so we won't get the best view. What else do we have here? We have some chickpea plants. If you wanted a really big crop of chickpeas, you'd have to do a huge area of them, because you only get a handful of pods off of each plant, and each pod only has 1 chickpea in usually. So really I just do 20 or 30 plants or so, and I pop them around at random on the berms, and we all just pick them. Usually when they're green, we pick them and eat them fresh like that. They taste absolutely fabulous. And then a few we'll leave on the plant to dry like this, and I'll save those seeds to plant for more chickpeas next year. There is a little white comfrey over there. He's newly planted, so he's not very big yet. Strawberries. This was Lacey Facilia, which if you want bees in your garden, particularly the big blue-black bees, and wasps, if you want to attract wasps to your garden, Lacey Facilia, it's been and gone now, but we'll have some seeds for next year. It's the absolute first main plant I would definitely recommend if you want to attract pollinators to your garden. As we carry on down Swale 3, there's a little overflow just there, like we had in the other one. More strawberries. Another comfrey plant is about half the size of the one that's over there, and I think that's because it actually prefers a little bit more shade than this one is getting here. Another tansy, because there's another cherry tree there. Little apple tree behind me. Can't remember what variety, so it's going to be a nice surprise. More strawberries. Here, this is a very interesting little plant. Now, Dom planted American groundnuts over there by a trellis that I'm going to show you in a little bit. And they've popped up this year. They didn't grow very well over there. We got 1 or 2 little strands coming up, and we kind of went, okay, they didn't do so well. This year, there's tons, and they're flowering, so that's very exciting. The only sad thing is that we're going to have to pull apart the berm to be able to harvest them. Strawberries. This here is a little olive tree. He's just about carrying on. He didn't get the best start in life, but he's okay. We've got a mulberry who is not at all happy with the amount of sunshine he's getting. So he needs a little bit of structure or shade, maybe another bigger plant behind him to give him a bit of shade. Strawberries. Mystery plant, and a few marigolds. The marigolds you see there at the end of berm 3. This little plant here is a lemon tree. The big expanse of straw that you see is actually my asparagus beds. My dad brought me this asparagus from Holland. It was already 2 or 3 years old, I think. The roots that we put in, they're in no dig beds. The straw is a mulch because they keep their roots very close to the surface, and they would just dry out like crazy with the sun. So they have a straw mulch. Each plant has a dripper on so that they get the water from the IBCs up the hill. And we actually had a very nice crop of asparagus this year. I was very pleased with it, very tasty. So we've got a little bed over here, then there's a path going through. A path going through here, but unfortunately Mr. Goji Berry is trying to take over. And then there's another asparagus bed over here as well. Walking past the asparagus beds, the cherry tree and the apple tree on my right. Here is the most magnificent nectarine tree. Last year it gave us 8, maybe 10 nectarines, and unfortunately the birds got to them before we did, and they pecked at every single one. The ants moved in, we lost the entire crop. which is very sad. So I'm glad to see it this year. It didn't give us any nectarines at all, but it's growing huge. So fingers crossed for next year. Behind the nectarine tree, there is a trellis. Now, growing up the bottom of the trellis over here on the left is pickling cucumbers for gherkins. We've had quite a decent crop already, got 2 or 3 jars worth, and they're still putting out more. So that's great. They love the afternoon shade that they get from all the plants around them. Here is a honeysuckle. It smells absolutely divine. It's one of my favourite flowers down here. Just smells so beautiful, and that's for no other reason than it makes us happy. Down here on the floor we have some sweet potatoes. They're doing really, really well, much better than the ones I have elsewhere in the garden. And this bed, let me show you the bed. This bed is very sad. It's my little failure. It was supposed to be an entire bed. All the soil that you see was supposed to be chamomile plants, like this guy here with a little butterfly on it. It's very beautiful. I sowed a packet of chamomile seeds and nothing much happened. I kept them watered and nothing really happened. So then I sowed 2 more packets of chamomile seeds and still nothing happened. Then I got 1 or 2 of these little plants came up and I was a little bit, okay, that's great. We're going to have a chamomile lawn, and then nothing really. And then I sowed a 4th packet of seeds and still nothing. So this is what I have. What do we got? Like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, maybe 13 chamomile plants. It's very sad. And do you want to know what it was? What was the problem? I bet you do. It was ants. Ants came and stole every single seed, apart from these few which managed to survive somehow. I don't know how. They've done it elsewhere. They moved all of our clover seeds, but they put them underground and it grew from the underground, so that wasn't so bad. I don't know what they did with my chamomile seeds, but I'm very sad. We were going to pick the flowers for tea, obviously, and they're supposed to be good for smoking. Dom smokes chamomile instead of tobacco and says that it's great. So he's out of luck this year, I'm afraid. I think what I'm going to do probably next year now in the spring is I will sow the seeds into a tray, I'll prick them out into modules. When they're big enough, I'll plant them out individually in the ground, and then it'll be fine. I was just trying to save myself all of that extra work by sowing directly in the garden. It just doesn't work when you have so many ants. So leaving the failed chamomile lawn and the asparagus behind us, we're coming down towards the bottom of the food forest now. There's a little orange tree here, surrounded by strawberries. Another cherry tree with tansy as its companion, more strawberries, more cosmos, a little red currant there, that's doing very well. A few more chickpeas and some little white flowers. Have absolutely no idea what they are. They seem to have popped up by themselves, but they're beautiful. Working our way back up the garden, we're into Swale 4 now, the last of the swales, curving off up there. Next to me is the most enormous fig. Now these figs, there's one on the other side, I'll show you in a moment. They were here when we put the food forest in. We actually cleared out some pine trees and some forest to be able to clear the ground to put our food forest in. And we saw the fig and we left him. He was much, much smaller, very weedy looking, and he's absolutely thriving getting so much water, both from the swale and from the watering that we do to our plants around us. Covered in figs. They're not quite ripe yet. It's not quite time for figs yet. But when it is time, they probably last for about a month, I would say. So we're eating fresh figs every day, and then this year we're going to try and dry as many as we can. Underneath the fig we have some peppermint that I grew from seed. Doesn't smell very minty, has beautiful little flowers, and it's not really spreading too much at the moment. More strawberries. These ones here are alpine strawberries, the rest are just normal garden variety. We've got more straw flowers, but in pearly white. Dill. Didn't get too much foliage on the dill this year, and I'm not sure why. Maybe it was too dry, but they're putting out lots and lots of seeds, which is fabulous. Also very much loved by butterflies and bees, and these cute little shield bugs. I see these shield bugs all over the garden as well. Underneath the fig in the semi-shade is another comfrey, because you can never have too much comfrey, and more strawberries. At the very end of the trellis here we have another rose-scented geranium, which has gotten huge. Obviously much prefers living here than the other one does living up there. Another dill here, which has already dropped its seeds, which is fabulous. We're just going to leave them in the ground. They'll come up next year. This, I'm sad that I didn't film this tour for you just 2 or 3 weeks ago, because this is my valerian. It's in its 2nd year. I grow it, well, for everything really. I'm going to harvest these seeds, the fluffy seed heads, so I can sow it for next year. and it's useful. The root is useful for medicinal purposes. It's very good for sleeping. And its flowers were absolutely gorgeous. Big, frothy white blooms just all over the place. It took up this whole space here in front of our outdoor bathtub, which you probably can't actually see very much anymore. The tree reaching up to the sky there is a little pear tree. We have never had pears from it, but it's really been getting its roots in, so I think next year is its year. We have more strawberries. There's a little bamboo at the back there, another little bamboo, strawberries, calendula. Now, the calendula has not grown very well this year. I'm not sure why. I've got them dotted around the garden. There's just 1 or 2 flowers. Last year, it was crazy. We had calendula coming out of our ears. It was so much. Strawberries, cosmos, little white currant, and the second fig. Down here, right at the end of the berm where I was showing you, these are the beautiful orange cosmos I mentioned. Rosie gave me a packet of these seeds for Christmas, and I was so happy that they grow beautiful. This is chocolate mint. It didn't do so well last year, but it's really thriving this year. There's another little comfrey here. This is Comfrey officinalis, which I grew from seed. All of the other ones are the bocking variety, which I was given by a friend. And then as we carry on round here, the banana circle carries on round there with the bamboos. Jerusalem artichokes behind me, which are fabulous. You eat the tubers and they just, once you've got them in your garden, they're just going to clump and grow and grow and grow. And if you think you've pulled them all up, you haven't. They're going to come back next year for you. So it's a wonderful thing to put in your garden. But if you're putting it in a perennial garden, food forest, you need to make sure that you've put them somewhere where you don't mind disturbing the ground, because you're going to have to dig them up. And then if we go that way, we go past the bathtub. This is our lovely outdoor bathtub. It's fantastic to have a cold bath in here. We just use cold water, no soaps or anything like that, so the water can drain straight out into the garden. It's really fantastic for cooling down on the hot summer days. Unfortunately, we can't use it at the moment because wasps have moved in. Where you see the little panel has fallen down, they've moved in, and they're quite protective of their nest, so we're just going to leave them to it for this year, and we'll nail that panel back on so they can't move in next year. Underneath the fig we have this fabulous rhubarb. It's in its 3rd year now. I was given it when it was already a grown plant, and we dug it up and moved it when we put the swales in. I nearly killed it the first year that I had it because I gave it too much afternoon sun. It didn't like it at all, no matter how much water I gave it. So that's why it's gone under the fig. It gets lots of morning sunshine, which it loves. The sun moves around there, and then the fig shades it for most of the rest of the afternoon. It's now split itself into 3 crowns. So next spring I might dig 2 of those up and move them elsewhere in the garden and keep one, let it get really big here. I love rhubarb, love to eat the stems, turn them into rhubarb compote and have it with yogurt. And we chop the tops off and use them for biomass in the compost. Very good for that. On my other side, I have this fabulous plant here. This is an evening primrose and it smells absolutely divine. And it's made these mad stems. I think my trouble with it is that I've planted it where it gets too much shade. So it's really leaning out, stretching out. They should be tall spires going straight up, and it's reaching out for the sunlight. Evening primrose is biennial, so I planted it last year and it just made a flat rosette about this high, just flat leaves towards the ground. So I thought when it flowered, it would just do a few little flowers. And actually in its 2nd year is when it puts these big spires up. And you can see on the end here, these are buds. And all of these from here, these are the seed pods. So it started putting out its first flowers here, and it just keeps putting out a few flowers, and then they die, and the next ones above it come up. Evening primrose has a lot of medicinal uses. You can use the seeds, you can eat the roots, you can eat the stems, you can eat the flowers. Has all sorts of uses. Plus it's absolutely beautiful. And by coming up Burn 4, we've reached the banana circle, the pièce de résistance. Absolutely so beautiful, feels really tropical. We've got carnas growing here with their fabulous little flowers up on sticks, leafy. I mean, it's very impressive, these bananas. Now this is Dom's baby. He designed it and created it, so I'm gonna let Dom tell you all about it.
So the banana circle is now in its 2nd year. We planted it in May of last year and it made it through its 1st winter, which you can see in a separate video where we wrapped it to protect them over the winter. And you can see here on my right, I've got one of my 2 giant Abyssinian bananas, the Musa Onsante, which is towering above me, must be at least 3 meters tall, and I'm rather hoping that that's going to flower this year and maybe even fruit. It has little red fruits which are very sweet, so that's very, very exciting, so fingers crossed. Behind me at the back we've also got the Musa Dwarf Cavendish, which despite its name of being a dwarf still gets to 3 or 4 meters high, and they got taken down to ground level at the winter, so they were protected, but they didn't do very well. But they've all come back. They're now about 1/2 meter tall, getting nice big leaves. So again, I was hoping they were going to fruit, but it's unlikely they'll fruit having been taken down to the ground, so they may fruit next year, and that again is my goal. So let me take you round the banana circle and I'll show you what we've got planted. So taking you round some of the plants, here we've got Carna Durban. That one I grow just because I like it. It's one of the rarest Carnas, and it's got beautiful striped leaves, has an orange flower. You can see it's spread quite nicely. Here's one of the Musa dwarf Cavendishes that I mentioned that made it through the winter, and it's actually several bananas here, some pups. So here's the main one in the middle, about 1/2 meter high now, pup next to it, and that hopefully will provide fruit next year if we can get it through the next winter okay. And then hiding underneath we've got a somewhat small elephant ears that has overwintered successfully, which is why it's a bit small, but these do get huge. And then along the back here we've got a lot of much bigger Carnas which we're growing for biomass. This is the Carna edulis, and it's a stunning plant. You can eat the bulbs, a bit like a potato tuber. Grows a vast amount of leaves which you can chop down and use to compost, which makes it very good at that kind of thing. And then further round, hiding in here, we've got an absolutely stunning dwarf Cavendish, which I think because it's in more shade has got a lot more of its purpley red coloration. Its blotches on the leaves are beautiful, but it's quite small. There's 2 or 3 in there, but they're only 1/2 foot high. And again, another elephant ears lurking. Along the front, we've got some baby lemongrasses, which are growing very slowly this year for some reason. Last year they got huge up here, so they need a good fertiliser, I think. And we've also got a few other little bits and pieces. We've got some nasturtiums, some different Carnas, much bigger elephants here, hiding here, with lovely dark green leaves. And then we go back round to another giant Abyssinian red. And then on the very front over to my left, we've got the Chinese dwarf bananas. And then also along the base here, we've got a variety of gingers and turmerics, particularly round this side in the shade. And then you notice on the left here, it's also very tall. I planted that on the border, primarily to create all this lovely shade here and make it look nice and tropically. Got some bird of paradise at the beginning, some different coloured Carnas, these lovely pink ones here that are just going to seed, some self-grown lovely big bamboos here. These were famously cut up with a hacksaw in one of our most famous early videos, doing very, very well. More Carnas, different bamboos. We've got some alpine strawberries down at the base here. Some smaller Carnas, some red Carnas, and it creates a lovely tropical vibe.
Come to the end of the food forest tour. I really hope you enjoyed watching that, finding out all the different plants that we have growing here. Got any questions, or I didn't quite give you enough information about anything, then feel free to leave us a comment below. We'd love to hear from you, love to hear your thoughts, and it was a real pleasure to make this. So if you liked it, please do give us a little thumbs up. It really helps us with the algorithm, helps us expand and find new people to watch our videos. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you again soon on the Wildlands. Bye.